Christmas, expecting heat lights, something that felt like family. Instead, the house hit me like a freezer. My breath fogged the hallway. No tree, no music. Just silence so loud it hurt. Then I saw the note on the counter neat like it was normal. We went on a cruise. You take care of Grandpa. I remember rereading it because my brain wouldn't accept what my eyes already knew. I followed a sound, barely a groan, into the dark guest room. He was there, my grandfather. Shivering so hard the bed frame trembled, skin the color of winter lips turning blue. They didn't forget him. They left him to die. I called 911 with my hands shaking, and when the paramedics lifted him, his eyes cracked open just enough to find mine. He whispered, "They don't know about... help me get revenge." And in that moment I realized this wasn't just a family problem. It was a line you can't uncross. When they returned. Before I tell you everything, I just need to know I'm not saying this into the void. Drop a simple hi in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. Sometimes knowing someone is there makes the truth easier to carry. And if you can please hit subscribe, not for me, but because stories like this happen behind closed doors every day, and the more we talk about them, the harder it gets for people to abandon the ones who can't fight back. My name is Caius Rourke, and this is what really happened. I came home for Christmas with that stupid simple hope people carry even when they swear they're past it. A warm house, a little noise, something that says you still belong somewhere. Erie was already buried in that kind of winter that doesn't feel like a season so much as a warning. The streets were slick with black ice, the kind you don't see until your tires whisper over it, and the neighborhoods were lit up like postcards, twinkle lights, porch wreaths, windows glowing soft gold. I pulled into my parents' driveway and felt my stomach tighten before I even killed the engine. Their house was dark. Not everyone's asleep dark. Dead dark. No colored bulbs along the gutters, no candle in the window, no stupid inflatable snowman leaning like it gave up. Just a silent box sitting in the cold. I sat there for a second with my hands on the wheel, still in my Marine winter uniform, my duffel bag on the passenger seat, my brain trying to talk me out of what my gut already knew. Maybe the power's out. Maybe they went to midnight service. Maybe I'm early. Then I stepped out and the cold slapped me awake. The air had teeth. Snow squeaked under my boots. The wind pushed at the bare trees like it was annoyed they were still standing. The front door opened too easily, like it hadn't been used in days. The cold inside hit harder than the cold outside. My breath fogged instantly thick and white, and I could smell it: stale air, old carpet, that metallic bite that comes when heat hasn't run for a long time. I reached for the railing out of habit, and my palm met wood that was ice cold, the kind of cold that travels up your bones. The heater wasn't just down, it had been off. For a while. I walked in slowly, listening. No hum of the furnace, no ticking from the vents, no TV murmuring in the background. Nothing. The living room was a dark shape, curtains pulled tight. No tree in the corner, no ornaments, no stockings. It didn't look like a house preparing for Christmas. It looked like a house someone cleared out on purpose, like warmth had been evicted. My duffel hit the carpet with a dull thud, and the sound felt too loud. I moved toward the kitchen because that's where my mother always left notes. Grocery lists, reminders, passive-aggressive little messages with too many exclamation points. The countertop caught a strip of streetlight from outside. In the middle of it sat a single sheet of paper placed neat and flat like it belonged there. I picked it up and read it once. We went on a cruise. You take care of Grandpa. I read it again because my brain refused to cooperate. A cruise. During Christmas. The words were so casual it felt obscene, like they'd written water the plants instead of keep a human being alive. I stared at the handwriting and tried to imagine my mother saying it out loud with that breezy voice she used when she wanted something to sound harmless. Then I heard it so faint I almost missed it. A sound that wasn't the house settling. Not a pipe. Not the wind. A muffled, weak groan like someone trying to speak through a mouthful of snow. My body moved before my thoughts caught up. Marines don't get the luxury of freezing up. You hear the sound, you identify the threat, you act. The hallway felt colder, like the temperature dropped with every step. I called out once, my voice echoing into the emptiness. Grandpa, no answer. Just another small, broken sound. The guest room door was pulled nearly shut. I pushed it open, and the darkness inside wasn't normal darkness. It had weight. Basement dark. Storm dark. I hit the switch. The light flickered once, twice, then steadied. And there he was. Grandpa Walt lay on top of the mattress like somebody had placed him there and forgotten him. Cardigan still on. Flannel pants. No blanket. His body was curled, but even curled he looked too still until I saw the shaking. He was shivering so hard the whole bed trembled, a violent tremor like his body was trying to start a fire with friction and failing. His skin was pale and waxy. His lips were turning that bluish purple that doesn't belong on anyone who's supposed to be alive. Grandpa, hey, look at me. I was already at his side, kneeling, my hands on his face, and the shock of his temperature punched through my gloves. He was ice. Not cold. Ice. Like the cold had gotten inside him and claimed the space where warmth should be. For half a second, my mind tried to throw memories at me the way it does when it can't handle the present. Grandpa teaching me to tie fishing line at the lake. Grandpa clapping the loudest at my boot camp graduation. Grandpa sending handwritten letters overseas because he thought emails were too flimsy for real love. Then the present snapped back, and it was worse because it made no sense. This man did everything right. He showed up. He took care of people. And now he was here in the dark, like a burden someone slid into a room to keep out of sight. Anger surged so fast it felt physical. It crawled up my throat, hot and bitter. I swallowed it down because rage doesn't warm a body. Rage doesn't stabilize breathing. I needed my hands steady. I stripped off my heavy winter coat, the one built for miserable field nights, and wrapped it around him, tucking it tight like I was building a shelter. His shivering didn't stop, but it shifted like my coat gave his body permission to keep fighting. Stay with me, I said, forcing my voice calm. You're not doing this alone. I'm getting help. My phone was already in my hand. I dialed 911 and pressed it to my ear, eyes never leaving his face. When the dispatcher answered, I didn't waste words. My grandfather's hypothermic. Elderly male, severe shivering, blue lips, unheated house. He's conscious, but fading. We need EMS now. I kept talking to Grandpa while I waited the way we're trained to talk to injured Marines, steady, simple, anchoring them to the moment. I told him my name like he'd ever forget it. I told him I was home. I told him to keep breathing. I kept one hand on his wrist, feeling for the rhythm of his pulse, the other rubbing his fingers because they were so stiff they barely moved. And then I started scanning the room with the part of my brain that never turns off. No space heater, no extra blankets within reach, no glass of water, no medicine bottle on the nightstand, no phone, not a cell phone, not a landline, nothing. If he needed help, if he woke up scared and cold, there was nothing he could reach. Whoever left him here didn't just walk away. They set the room up so he couldn't call anyone to stop them. Red lights finally spilled across the snow outside. The siren cut through the neighborhood like a knife. 2 EMTs rushed in their boots, loud on the hardwood carrying gear that looked absurdly bright against the dim house. One took one look at Grandpa and his face tightened. Jesus. How long's he been in here? I just got home, I said, and the words tasted like metal. There was a note. They moved fast, vitals, oxygen, thermal blankets, lifting him carefully like he was fragile glass. Grandpa's eyes fluttered toward me, panic and confusion mixed with something like apology, and it made my chest ache. I'm coming, I told him before anyone could argue. I'm not leaving him. Nobody stopped me. The EMTs were too busy. Maybe they saw the uniform and understood I wasn't going to be talked out of it. I climbed into the back of the ambulance, sat by Grandpa's head, and held his hand as the doors slammed shut, and the world outside became a blur of snow and streetlights. Under the thermal blanket, his fingers still trembled. His pulse was thin, but there. I watched his face, watched the oxygen move with his breath, and I kept hearing that note in my head like a taunt. We went on a cruise. You take care of Grandpa. As the ambulance hit the main road, and the siren wailed into the winter night, One question kept pounding behind my ribs louder than everything else. If they went on a cruise, who decided to shut off the heat and cut every way he could survive UPMC? Hammat looked like every hospital at night, bright, sterile, and indifferent. Like the building itself didn't care what day it was or what holiday people pretended could protect them. The automatic doors opened and the warm air inside hit my face, but it didn't feel comforting. It felt wrong, like the kind of warmth you get after you've already been burned. They rolled Grandpa Walt straight into a curtained bay. Nurses moved around him with practiced urgency, hanging bags of warmed IV fluid, snapping gloves on sliding monitors onto his chest. A doctor leaned close, speaking in that calm tone people use when they're trying not to scare you. "We're going to warm you slowly, sir. Heated blankets, warm fluids, oxygen. Just keep breathing for us." Grandpa's eyes were half open, unfocused. His lips were still that bruised shade of blue. When the heated blanket went over him, I watched his shoulders jerk with another violent shiver, and I hated my parents with a clarity that felt almost clean. I stood back because there were too many hands in too small a space, but I couldn't just stand there empty. I watched. I memorized. I tracked the steps like it was a drill. Heart rate, oxygen saturation, temperature reading that made my stomach twist when I saw the number. Old bodies don't bounce back the way younger ones do. Hypothermia doesn't play fair. A nurse, older, tired eyes, the kind of competence you can feel, stepped beside me after they stabilized him enough to breathe without fighting. "You're his grandson?" she asked quietly. "Yes, ma'am." She looked at my uniform, then back at Grandpa, and her mouth tightened. "He's lucky you found him when you did. In older adults, hypothermia sets in fast. Another couple hours." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. She walked away to chart something, and the unfinished words hung there like a sentence being read in court. I stood at the edge of the curtain with my hands clenched so hard my knuckles turned white. Another couple hours. That was the distance between he's alive and he died alone in the dark. And that distance existed because someone chose a cruise over a human being. When the immediate crisis slowed, a woman approached with a badge clipped to her sweater and a folder in her arms. She didn't look like a nurse. She looked like someone who had learned how to stay calm in rooms full of grief and conflict. "Hi," she said gently. "I'm Ms. Tessa Nguyen. I work with the hospital social work team, and we coordinate with adult protective services when there are safety concerns. Can we talk?" I nodded because my throat felt too tight to answer with anything else. She pulled a chair to the side away from the bustle and opened her folder. Her voice stayed soft, but her questions were direct, sharp enough to cut through excuses. "How long was your grandfather alone?" "I don't know," I said. "I just got in tonight. I wasn't told he'd be alone. Who normally lives with him?" "My parents. This is their house." "And when you arrived, what did you find?" I told her exactly what I'd seen because I didn't trust my anger to speak in anything but facts. I described the driveway dark, the house cold, the empty living room, the note on the counter. I said the words out loud, and hearing them made the situation sound even more unreal. "We went on a cruise. You take care of Grandpa." Ms. Tessa's eyebrows lifted just slightly, like disbelief trying to stay professional. "And the heat." "It was off," I said. "Not struggling, not low. Off." The house felt like a refrigerator. Was there food accessible to him? Water. A phone within reach? I shook my head. No phone. No water near the bed. No blankets. Nothing set up for him to take care of himself. She wrote while I spoke, her pen scratching lightly. The sound of it made my chest tighten. Every detail I'd noticed, thermostat, darkness, missing essentials, wasn't just a tragic scene anymore. It was documentation, a record, a line-by-line account of what was done to him. "This may meet criteria for elder neglect," she said after a moment, her tone still controlled. "Possibly abandonment. In Pennsylvania, depending on circumstances, that can be serious." Serious how I asked, even though I already knew I wanted the answer. She held my gaze. Serious as in consequences, and serious as in we have a duty to make sure he's safe. If we determine there's ongoing risk, mandatory reporting laws apply. I felt something settle inside me, something cold and steady. Part of me wanted to explode to call my parents on the spot and unleash everything I'd been holding back since I read that note. But another part of me, the part trained in discipline, recognized the path in front of us. You don't win battles by screaming. You win by securing the facts, protecting the vulnerable, and making it impossible for the truth to be buried. I want it handled the right way, I said. Ms. Tessa nodded once, like she'd been waiting to hear that. That's what we'll do. Hours blurred. Grandpa's temperature crawled up degree by degree like his body was climbing back from a cliff. The hospital never truly quieted. Even at midnight there were footsteps, distant voices, monitors beeping in steady patterns. The fluorescent lights never dimmed enough to let you forget where you were. I stayed in the chair beside him, my elbows on my knees, my eyes on his chest, rising and falling. I tried to let myself breathe. I tried to calm the storm behind my ribs. But every time my eyelids got heavy, I saw him in that room again, blue lips shaking so hard, the bed rattled. I thought about my mother's handwriting on that note, about my father's usual smirk when he got away with something, about how they'd boarded a ship with drinks and buffet trays while Grandpa lay in the dark with no heat and no phone. Somewhere around 6 in the morning, a nurse came in to check vitals. She smiled at Grandpa, then at me, like she was trying to offer something human inside all this machinery. He's hanging on, she said. You did the right thing calling when you did. After she left, I reached out and covered Grandpa's hand with mine. His skin was warmer than it had been, but still too cool. His fingers twitched slightly under my palm like he could feel me there. I'm here, I murmured. I'm not leaving you alone again. His eyelids fluttered, and for a second I thought he was still asleep. Then his eyes opened a fraction. Not wide, not clear, just enough to find my face. He didn't say thank you. He didn't ask where my parents were. He didn't complain about pain. He whispered like he was handing me a weapon. They don't know about... His voice caught breath thin, and I leaned closer until my ear was nearly at his mouth. My heart hammered so loud I was afraid I'd miss the words. Help me. He breathed, and there was something in his tone I'd never heard from him, something sharp and deliberate. Help me get revenge. The word hit me harder than the cold ever had. Grandpa Walt. The man who used to slip extra cash into my hand for gas even when I didn't need it. The man who never raised his voice. The man who prayed before meals and held doors open for strangers. He was asking for revenge. I swallowed, forcing my face to stay calm so I didn't scare him. I'm here, I said, voice steady, the same tone I'd used in worse places than a hospital. You're safe. I've got you. And we're going to do this the right way. His eyes held mine for a beat, one clean moment of recognition, then drifted shut again as his body pulled him back under. I stayed frozen in that chair long after he fell asleep, the words echoing behind my ribs. They don't know about... Help me get revenge. The sentence felt unfinished on purpose, like a door left cracked open. I stood and stepped out into the hallway where the air was cooler and smelled like disinfectant and coffee. The hospital felt endless at that hour-long corridors, humming lights, the quiet tension of people waiting for outcomes. I stared at the floor for a second, breathing slow, letting the reality settle in. My parents were out on the ocean somewhere, sipping cocktails, telling themselves they deserved a break. Grandpa was fighting for his life under fluorescent lights, and now he'd put something in my hands, something they didn't know about. This wasn't going to end with a family argument and a guilty apology. The system was already involved. Ms. Tessa had already heard the facts. There was already a record. And Grandpa had just revealed there was more. Some hidden truth, some piece of proof, some reason he believed they'd left him to die beyond simple selfishness. I walked back into his room, sat down again, and watched the monitor rise and fall with each heartbeat. His breathing was steadier now, but his face looked smaller under the blanket, like the night had taken something from him that warmth alone couldn't return. By the time the sky outside the narrow window started to pale, my decision was already made. In the morning, I was going back to that house. If they don't know about something, then it was still sitting in the place they thought they controlled. And I was going to find it before they could come home and erase it. Morning came in thin, colorless layers, the kind of daylight that doesn't feel like hope so much as exposure. The hospital was quieter than it had been overnight, but it wasn't calm. It was the hush you get when everyone's bracing for whatever comes next. The fluorescent lights still bleached the hallways. The air still smelled like disinfectant and burnt coffee, and the steady mechanical beeping from Grandpa Walt's monitor kept my nerves tuned tight like it was counting down something I couldn't see. He looked better in the simplest way that matters. His lips weren't blue anymore, and the shaking had slowed to occasional shudders instead of full-body convulsions. But he looked smaller too, like the night had stolen weight from him and left him with only the essentials. I sat close enough to hear his breathing without leaning in close enough that if he reached out, my hand would already be there. A nurse with silver hair and a voice that carried authority without volume came in to check his vitals. She moved with the kind of efficiency that comes from years of seeing families show up too late and pretending they didn't. She adjusted the blanket, glanced at the monitor, then looked at me. "Older bodies don't forgive cold," she said quietly, like she was giving me a rule, not an opinion. "People think hypothermia is dramatic. It isn't. It's quiet. It just takes. You did the right thing getting him here." I nodded, but my throat tightened around the words I wanted to say. I didn't want praise. I wanted to know why this had been allowed to happen at all. When she left, Grandpa's eyes fluttered open again, more focused this time. His gaze found me held for a second, and something in his expression shifted from foggy survival to sharp recognition. He swallowed his throat, working like it hurt to even do that. "Kid," he rasped. His voice sounded like paper dragged across wood. "I'm here," I said. "Don't try to talk too much. Just stay with me." He gave a tiny nod, then stared at the ceiling for a moment as if he was lining up thoughts, choosing which ones mattered most. That alone scared me. He wasn't confused. He wasn't drifting. He was deciding. I leaned forward. "Grandpa, why didn't you call me? Why didn't you call anyone?" His eyes slid to mine, and the sadness in them wasn't soft. It was tired. "Couldn't." "What do you mean? Couldn't?" He breathed in shallow, careful. "Phone's been cut off. Months." The words landed like a punch, clean and direct. "Cut off," I repeated, like if I said it out loud it might stop being real. Why, he made a sound that might have been a laugh if it hadn't been so dry. "Your father said it was too expensive. Said nobody uses landlines anymore. Said I didn't need it." My hands curled into fists in my lap. I pictured that guest room again, the empty nightstand, the dark corners. No phone, no way to call out. It wasn't just neglect. It was isolation built into the walls. And the heat, I said, forcing my voice level. Why was the house that cold? His eyelids lowered, not from sleep, from resignation. "To save money," he said. "That's what they call it." "That night, you mean?" He turned his head slightly slow, and the look he gave me made my stomach drop. "Not just that night." I stared at him, hearing the words but not wanting to accept what they implied. "How long has it been like that?" He didn't give me a number. He didn't need to. The pause said enough. "They turn it down. Sometimes off. They tell me to wear another sweater. Tell me I'm old and always cold anyway." Something hot surged behind my eyes, and I blinked it back hard. Anger would make me careless. Careless would get him hurt again. I waited until he caught his breath, then asked the question that had been digging under my skin since he whispered in the dark hours before dawn. "Grandpa, last night you said they don't know about something. What don't they know?" For a second, he didn't answer. He looked past me toward the curtain, toward the hallway, toward the world outside this room. His gaze moved like he was checking for ears that weren't there. It was a habit of someone who'd learned not to speak freely in his own home. Then he lowered his voice anyway. "They don't know about the papers." "The papers," I repeated, careful. "What papers?" He swallowed again. "Your grandma," he said, and the mention of her name changed the temperature in the room like a door had opened to a different time. Imogene didn't trust them. She loved them, but she didn't trust them. I thought of her hands, always busy, always gentle, always steady. The way she used to sit in that little den off the hallway with her Bible open and the morning light falling across the pages. My father never went in there unless he needed something, and even then he acted like the room offended him. She left instructions, Grandpa continued. Letters, a will, deed copies, things the lawyer has and things she kept at home. I hid the home copies. Your father never found them. His mouth tightened. He thinks he's got everything locked down. Thinks he's already won. My heart started pounding, not just from anger now, but from clarity. What Grandpa's eyes sharpened. Control, he said simply. Money. House. My choices. Everything. I leaned in closer, lowering my own voice without meaning to. Are you saying they've been taking your money? He didn't flinch. He didn't soften it. They've been siphoning it, he said. Little by little. Pension, checks, transfers. Your father calls it managing. He acts like I'd be lost without him. Grandpa's hand trembled under the blanket and he clenched it into a fist with effort. I'm not lost. I'm trapped. The room felt too small all at once. I tried to picture my parents in their bright cruise photos, the kind they post like proof they're living right, while Grandpa sat in a cold house with no phone and money leaking out of his account like a slow bleed. How much, I asked. He closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, there was something like shame in the corners. Not because he'd done wrong, but because he'd endured it. More than I want to admit, he said. Enough that they'd rather I didn't have a voice. A chill ran up my spine that had nothing to do with winter. I'd been angry about abandonment. Now I was seeing a shape behind it, motive pressure, a reason the cold felt deliberate. I took a slow breath. Okay. Where are the papers? He watched me for a long moment, measuring. It wasn't distrust. It was caution. Not yet, he said. My jaw tightened. Grandpa, listen, he cut in, and even weak his voice carried weight. You're strong. You're smart. But you're angry. He breathed out a small cloud. Angry men make noise. Noise gives them time to cover tracks. I forced my hands open, made myself relax my shoulders. He was right. I didn't like it, but he was right. I'll do it right, I said. Tell me. He shook his head slightly. I'll tell you when I'm sure you'll do what I say, he murmured. Not what your temper wants. I swallowed the urge to argue. Then tell me what you need from me. His eyes softened just a fraction. Start where your grandma prayed, he said. That little room, the den. He never looks in there. He thinks it's dust and old books. Grandpa's mouth curved into something almost amused, though it didn't reach his eyes. Your father only searches places he thinks are important. That's why he misses what matters. I nodded slowly, the image of that room snapping into focus so sharply it felt like standing in it. The recliner by the window, the sagging shelf of devotionals and family albums, the brown leather Bible with worn edges, the way the den always smelled faintly like paper and lemon polish. Grandpa's eyelids drooped, fatigue dragging at him again. Before he drifted, he reached for my hand, his grip surprisingly firm for a man who'd nearly frozen to death. Do it clean, he whispered. Don't let them see you coming. I squeezed back. I won't. Outside his room, Ms. Tessa Nguyen was waiting in the hallway like she'd timed it. She held her folder against her chest, her expression calm but intent. How's he doing? She asked. Stable, I said. More awake. He told me some things. Her eyes narrowed slightly. About his living situation. About more than that, I said carefully. He says there are documents. Proof. He says my parents don't know about them. Ms. Tessa didn't look surprised. She looked focused. If there are documents that establish Intent Finance's ownership, anything connected to his care or safety, you need to secure them quickly, she said, before anyone has the chance to move them. And don't confront your parents alone. I'm not planning to, I said. I'm planning to make sure he's safe. She nodded once, approving the phrasing because it kept the priority where it belonged. Good. If you leave the hospital for a few hours, make sure the nurses know you're reachable. Leave me your number if I don't already have it. And if you find anything, don't post it. Don't discuss it with anyone who doesn't need to know. Keep it contained. I gave her my phone number anyway and watched her write it down. The act felt like locking a door. Once the system had your number, the story wasn't private anymore. It was recorded. It could be followed. It could be enforced. Back in Grandpa's room, I told the nurse I needed to step out briefly, that Grandpa was stable, that I'd be reachable in minutes. I stood at the foot of the bed for a moment, watching him sleep, watching the monitor keep time. The anger was still there, but it had changed shape. It wasn't fire anymore. It was a blade. I walked out of the hospital into air that cut my face and made my eyes water. The wind off the lake felt like it wanted to peel the skin from my cheeks. I pulled my collar up and headed for my car. All I could think was that den, the place my father ignored, the place my grandmother claimed with her quiet faith. If the truth was hidden anywhere in that house, it would be there. And if my parents came home before I found it, they'd erase whatever they could. I started the engine heat, blasting cold air at first, like the car itself had been asleep, and I drove back toward the neighborhood with one mission beating steady in my chest. Get to that room, secure what Grandpa hid, and make sure the next chapter of this doesn't belong to the people who wrote that note. The roads were emptier than they should have been on Christmas morning, like everyone had decided to stay inside and pretend the world was gentle. Erie didn't feel gentle. Snow sat in dirty piles along the curbs. Wind worried at the edges of everything. My tires crunched over salt and ice as I turned onto my parents' street, and the houses looked like scenes from different stories, families behind lit windows, movement in kitchens, smoke curling from chimneys. Their house was still the same dark shape it had been the night before, except now I knew what that darkness contained. I didn't rush the door. I stood on the porch for a moment and looked at it the way you look at a building before you clear it. Not because I expected an intruder, but because I expected evidence. There's a difference. One threatens your body. The other threatens your ability to prove what happened. When I unlocked the door and stepped in, the cold met me like a wall. Not as shocking as last night, but steady, stubborn, embedded. My breath still showed. That alone told me the heat hadn't been flickering. It had been off long enough for the house to hold cold like a grudge. I pulled out my phone before I moved deeper and started documenting the way I'd been trained to document anything that might matter later. I took a wide shot from the entryway, showing the dark living room, the drawn curtains, the bare corners where a Christmas tree should have been. I walked toward the kitchen and filmed my own breath clouding in front of me, a small detail that said more than any argument could. The note was still on the counter, exactly where I'd left it by accident, and now wanted to leave on purpose. I didn't touch it. I took close-up photos, clear enough to show handwriting, clear enough to show how neatly it had been placed. I took another shot that included the empty space around it, the absence of anything festive, as if the house had been stripped of celebration to match the people inside it. Then I turned to the thermostat. Last night in the panic and noise, I hadn't stopped to study it. Now I did. The display wasn't dead. The unit wasn't broken. It was set low, absurdly low for a Pennsylvania winter. I took a photo of the screen, then another, showing the physical switches, the position of the controls. I opened the small panel and checked for anything that would suggest malfunction. Nothing. This wasn't a system failing. This was a setting chosen. I moved to the breaker panel next and snapped a photo of it too, just in case anyone tried to claim power issues later. The house had power. The lights worked. The refrigerator hummed. The cold wasn't accidental. I walked down the hallway toward the guest room, and the temperature dropped again, like the cold had been concentrated there. The door opened with a soft creak, and even empty, the room felt wrong. The bed was still rumpled where Grandpa had been. The thin sheet was twisted, useless. There were no extra blankets folded at the foot, no space heater in the corner, no cup on the nightstand, no bottle of water, no phone. I filmed the nightstand and the empty surface like I was filming an alibi. I crouched beside the bed and looked at the outlet. Nothing plugged in. No lamp. No heating pad. Nothing that would make the room survivable if you were old, weak, and alone. My chest tightened as I panned the camera to the window. The curtains were thin. The glass held a faint halo of frost at the edges. I thought about Grandpa lying here listening to the house creak, feeling the cold work its way deeper with every hour, unable to call out. I forced myself to keep moving. Feelings later. Proof now. In the kitchen, I opened the refrigerator. It wasn't empty, which almost made it worse. It was full of the kind of food that required energy Grandpa didn't have and steps he shouldn't have been taking, raw ingredients, leftovers in containers without labels, condiments lined up like decoration. No ready-to-eat meals, no easy snacks at eye level. Nothing that said anyone had thought even for a second what an 80-something man could manage in the dark while freezing. I took photos of the shelves, then shut the door and looked around the counters. No fruit bowl, no kettle on standby, no stack of microwave soups. The house wasn't set up for care. It was set up for adults who could fend for themselves. Grandpa couldn't. That was the point. I moved to the mail area near the back door where my mother always dropped envelopes. A small stack sat there, but when I lifted it, I noticed the counter underneath was clean in a way that felt staged, like someone had swept away anything that might raise questions. I opened the drawer beneath and found what they'd tried to hide: envelopes stuffed in haphazardly bills, folded tight notices mixed in with grocery coupons. I didn't unfold everything. I didn't need to yet. I just filmed the drawer the way it was, the mess of paper shoved out of sight. This wasn't just sloppiness. It was avoidance made physical. I stepped back into the living room and listened again. The house made small sounds: fridge hum, distant wind, the soft crack of settling wood. No human sounds, no warmth, no proof that anyone had checked on Grandpa with even the minimum care. Outside, a snow shovel scraped against concrete. I looked through the front window and saw Mr. Callahan, the older man from across the street, clearing his driveway with slow, stubborn movements. I remembered Grandpa's words about not making noise. But a witness wasn't noise. A witness was leverage. I walked out, pulled my collar tight, and crossed the street. "Morning," I called, keeping my tone neutral. Mr. Callahan paused, leaned on his shovel, and looked me over. His eyes flicked to my uniform, then to the dark house behind me. "You're the Rourke boy." "Yes, sir," I said. "Caius." He nodded once, the kind of nod men give when they recognize something they don't want to say out loud. "Haven't seen you in a while." "I just got in last night," I said, then let a beat pass. "I found my grandfather in bad shape. He's in the hospital." Mr. Callahan's mouth tightened. I was afraid of that. The words made my stomach dip. "Why?" He shifted his grip on the shovel. "I heard something a couple nights," he said slowly. "Not enough to be sure. A cough. Like someone's struggling. But your folks always act like everything's fine. And I didn't want to stick my nose where it didn't belong." I kept my face still. "Did you see my parents leave?" He exhaled white breath in the cold. "Yeah," he said. "Yesterday evening. They were hauling suitcases, laughing about finally getting some peace and quiet. I heard your dad say something about a cruise. Like it was a joke." My jaw clenched so hard it ached. "Did you see anyone check on Grandpa before they left?" Mr. Callahan shook his head. "I didn't see anyone go into that back room. I saw them load the trunk and go. House went dark early." I nodded, filing it away. "If someone from Adult Protective Services asks you about it, would you be willing to say what you just said?" He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "Yeah," he said. "I don't like getting in people's business. But I like old men freezing to death even less." "Thank you," I said, and meant it. Back inside, I didn't let myself sink into rage. I kept moving like this was a job and I had a checklist. I took a final set of photos from consistent angles: countertop with the note, thermostat, guest room, refrigerator, the drawer of shoved mail. I spoke the date and time quietly into the video recording so it would be clear later. My hand stayed steady, but my heart felt like it was being squeezed. When I had enough, I stepped into the kitchen and stared at the thermostat again. Part of me wanted to crank it up immediately, flood the house with heat as if that could undo what had happened. But I forced myself to wait until after I finished documenting everything, evidence first, prevention second. Then I turned the heat on, not for my parents, never for them. For the simple reason that I refused to let this place be used as a weapon again, even for one more hour. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Ms. Tessa Nguyon's name lit the screen, and I answered on the first ring. "I'm at the house," I said before she could ask. "I'm documenting. The note is still here. The thermostat isn't broken. It's been set low manually. There's no phone in the room, no water, no blankets within reach. I have photos and video. I spoke to a neighbor who saw them leave with suitcases and heard them talk about the cruise." Her voice stayed calm, but I heard the shift in attention the way professionals lock in when a report turns into a pattern. "Good," she said. "Keep everything organized. Don't confront them when they come back. And secure any documents if you find them. But don't take risks." "I won't," I said, though my body wanted to argue. "I'm doing this clean." "Your priority remains your grandfather's safety," she reminded me. "I know," I said. "That's the only reason I'm here." I ended the call and stood in the kitchen for a moment, letting the quiet settle. The heater began to hum faint at first, then stronger, like the house was waking up against its will. Warm air started to move through vents that had been silent too long. It should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt like proof that warmth had always been available and deliberately withheld. I looked at the drawer stuffed with mail, at the neat cruelty of that note, at the still dark living room that hadn't bothered to pretend it was Christmas, and a thought slid into place, cold and undeniable. Cutting off Grandpa's phone, turning down the heat over and over, hiding bills in a drawer, leaving him with no simple food and no way to call for help. Those weren't random bad decisions. They were control, quiet, layered, practiced. I turned toward the hallway. Grandpa had told me where to start. The room my father dismissed. The place my grandmother prayed. I headed for the den because whatever my parents didn't want me to find was almost certainly waiting in the one place they never respected enough to search. The den was exactly where my memory kept it, tucked off the hallway like a secret the rest of the house pretended didn't exist. The moment I stepped inside, the air changed. It wasn't warmer, not really, but it felt less hostile. It smelled like paper and old wood and lemon polish, like my grandmother had just wiped down the shelves and stepped out to make tea. The quiet in that room wasn't empty the way the living room had been. It was settled, reverent, the kind of silence that carries years in it. Her recliner still sat by the window cushion, permanently shaped to her body. A small side table beside it held a coaster and a lamp that hadn't been turned on in forever. Along the wall, the bookcase sagged under the weight of worn devotionals, photo albums, and Bibles with cracked spines. My father never touched any of it. He treated the den like a storage closet for someone else's faith. I moved slowly, not because I was afraid, but because I needed my hands and head clear. I'd already documented the house. I'd already spoken to Mr. Callahan. I'd already spoken to Ms. Tessa. Now I was in the part of the mission Grandpa had handed me, and I wasn't about to contaminate it with panic. I went straight to the Bible my grandmother used to read every morning, the brown leather one with softened edges, the one with the corners worn from her thumbs. I lifted it off the shelf and felt a small swell in my chest, the kind you get when you hold something that outlived the person who loved it. I opened it where there was a faint bend in the pages, a place that looked like it had been returned to over and over. Halfway through Psalms, my fingers caught on something that didn't belong. An envelope. Plain. Slightly yellowed. My name written across the front in my grandmother's careful cursive. Caius. I stood there for a second, staring at it like I was 13 again, watching her write birthday cards at the kitchen table, tongue tucked against her teeth when she concentrated. The house could be freezing. The world could be upside down. That handwriting still hit the same part of me. I slid the envelope out and opened it with hands that stayed steady only because I forced them to. The paper inside was folded neatly, edges crisp. The first line was simple. Dear Caius, if you're reading this, it means I didn't get to sit you down the way I wanted. It means something has gone wrong. My throat tightened. I kept reading. She wrote the way she always spoke. Gentle, honest, refusing to dress hard truth up in pretty words. She said she loved her son. She loved my mother. But she worried about them. About the way they talked more about what we'll have someday than what we should do today. About the way money made them careless and fear made them cruel. She said she and Grandpa Walt had gone to see an attorney because they wanted their wishes followed, not assumed. She said there were safeguards in place for Grandpa's care and for the house, and for whatever money remained. She said if anything ever felt wrong, I should call the attorney listed on the enclosed card because he knew their instructions. Then she wrote one sentence that felt like she'd reached through time and grabbed my wrist. "We trust you to do what's right even when it hurts." Tucked behind the letter was an index card with a law office name and a local number. Elliot Hargrove, attorney at law, Northeast PA. The ink was slightly smudged, like she'd pressed her finger to it after writing. I held the card and felt the rage I'd been carrying sharpen into something more precise. This wasn't just a family argument waiting to happen. My grandmother had built a bridge to the legal world and left it for me, knowing someday I might need it. I slipped the letter and the card into the inside pocket of my uniform right over my chest, as if keeping them close could keep her close too. For a second, I let my eyes shut. "I've got you, Grandma," I thought. "I'm here." Then I moved. Grandpa had said the home copies were hidden where my father would never bother to look. I turned toward the old desk beside the recliner. The top was cluttered with harmless junk-dried pens, a deck of cards missing half its faces, a cracked magnifying glass. I slid open the drawer and found exactly what my father would have ignored: more small junk, more clutter, the kind of mess he hated dealing with. Under it, pushed far back like it had been waiting, sat a metal cigar tin with faded lettering. I recognized it immediately. Grandpa used to keep foreign coins in there when I was a kid, souvenirs from a friend who traveled. My father would have seen it and dismissed it as worthless. I pulled it out and opened the lid. Inside were the coins, a rusty keychain, and beneath them a packet of papers held together with a brittle rubber band. The rubber band cracked slightly as I touched it, old and dry. My heartbeat thudded in my ears as I lifted the packet out and unfolded the first page. A deed. Not a photocopy of some irrelevant old document. A deed with the property address printed cleanly at the top. I scanned down to the name and the air seemed to thicken as if the room itself was holding its breath. Walter Rourke. My grandfather. Not my father. Not my mother. Walter Rourke. I flipped to the next page and saw a notation in the margin that made my chest go tight. A life estate interest referencing me by name. My name on paper tied to the house, not as a vague promise but as a legal thread. I kept turning pages, hands steady, mind racing. Bank statements followed, thin paper, columns of numbers, month after month of transfers. Out of Grandpa's small account into an account with my father's name on it. Not a one-off, not a reimbursement labeled clearly. Just vague online transfers, consistent, regular, always moving one direction. I remembered my father's voice from years ago, heavy with fake martyrdom. "You have no idea what it costs to take care of him. We're the ones carrying him." Looking at those statements, something cold slid into place. They weren't carrying him. He was carrying them. In the back of the packet was a photocopy of a will signatures at the bottom letterhead matching the name on my grandmother's index card. It laid out instructions in plain language. Grandpa's care paid first. Safeguards against coercion. After his death, the house and a portion of savings directed toward me. My parents included, but not as sole beneficiaries, not as owners, not as the ones holding the keys to everything. Tucked behind the will was one more note in my grandmother's handwriting addressed to Grandpa. "If they pressure you, remember Caius will do what's right." My throat tightened so fast it hurt. I held the paper down with my palm as if anchoring it to the world. Grandpa hadn't been speaking in riddles at the hospital. He'd been handing me a map. I didn't sit there and read every line like I had all day. I didn't let myself get lost in it. Marines don't celebrate in the middle of a mission. You secure what you have, you keep it from the enemy, you move it to safety. I stacked the deed, the statements, the will copy, and my grandmother's note in the same order I found them. I slid them into a manila envelope from the kitchen drawer, then grabbed a pen and wrote the date and time on the front, along with one short note. Found in den desk drawer, cigar tin beneath miscellaneous items. I wasn't making it poetic. I was making it usable. Then I carried the envelope out to my car like it weighed 1,000 pounds and nothing at all at the same time. I opened the trunk, set it deep inside, and locked it. Twice. When I stood up, the winter air felt sharper, as if the world had noticed what I'd taken back. In the driver's seat, I pulled out the index card with Elliot Hargrove's number and stared at it for one steady breath. Then I dialed. Law Office of Elliot Hargrove. A woman answered, brisk but not cold. "This is Karen." "Hi," I said. "My name is Staff Sergeant Caius Rourke. My grandparents are Walter and Imogene Rourke. I found a letter from my grandmother telling me to call you if something felt wrong." There was a pause, the kind of pause that carries recognition without needing words. "Mr. Hargrove mentioned we might hear from you one day," Karen said more softly. "Are you safe right now?" "Yes," I said. "My grandfather is in the hospital. He was left in an unheated room overnight. There are financial documents, transfers." Another pause. Then, "Can you come in today?" "Yes," I said immediately. "Good. I'll let Mr. Hargrove know. Bring whatever you found, but if you're worried about anyone intercepting it, bring copies if possible." "I can bring photos," I said. "And I have the original secured." "Perfect," she replied, and the way she said it told me she'd heard this story in pieces before, just with different names. When I ended the call, my phone buzzed again before I could even put it down. The screen lit up with my mother's name. A call from out at sea. My stomach tightened. There were only two reasons she'd call now. Either they were coming back early or they'd realized something was shifting under their feet and they wanted to grab the steering wheel before they lost the road. I answered. "Mom." Her voice came through with that forced cheerfulness people use when they're trying to keep control. I could hear faint background noise, muffled music, the sound of other people living their holiday like nothing mattered. "Caius, honey. You're home. I got in last night," I said, keeping it short. "Oh, good," she said too fast. "So you're with Grandpa. How is he?" "In the hospital," I said. "Hypothermia. Dehydration. He almost died." Silence. Not guilt. Calculation. A tiny break in the performance. That can't be right," she finally said. "Your father checked on him before we left. The furnace is old, you know. It probably Adult Protective Services is involved," I said, calm as a report. "A social worker documented the situation." I heard her inhale sharply. "Caius, don't make this into a thing. It already is," I said. He was freezing in the dark. Her voice dropped lower, urgent now. "Listen, we didn't mean. We were just trying to get a break. You know how hard it's been." I stared at the street through my windshield, the neighborhood quiet under snow, and felt my jaw clamp down. "Where are you?" "On the ship," she said like I didn't know. "But we'll talk when we get back. Just don't touch anything in the house. Don't start digging through stuff. You always do this. You always think you know." I kept my voice even. "I'll see you when you get back." Caius. I ended the call before she could shape the narrative any further. My hands were steady on the phone, but my pulse hammered. She wasn't calling to check on Grandpa. She was calling to make sure I hadn't found what she was afraid of. I exhaled slowly, then started the car. The law office was waiting, and the clock had started. The drive to Northeast felt longer than it should have, not because of miles, but because every minute made the gap between me and my parents' return feel thinner. The sky was a low, bruised gray. The road was slick in patches, and I kept both hands on the wheel like I was driving through a situation, not weather. My phone sat in the cup holder where I could see it light up. I didn't want to miss anything from the hospital. I didn't want to miss anything from Ms. Tessa. And I didn't want another call from my mother unless I was ready to control it. Halfway there, my phone buzzed with a text message from my father. "Don't touch anything in the house. No greeting. No question about Grandpa, just a command." My throat went tight with a bitter, almost laughable kind of confirmation. They weren't worried about him. They were worried about their story. And the moment they sensed they might not be the ones telling it, they reached for control like it was oxygen. I didn't respond. I let the message sit there on the screen proof in its own way. Elliot Hargrove's office was in a converted old house with a wreath hanging crooked on the door and creaky wooden steps that complained under my boots. It didn't feel like a corporate tower. It felt like a place my grandparents would have trusted. Inside, the air smelled like paper and old coffee. A small waiting area held framed photos of fishing trips and grandkids and a golden retriever. Normal life. The kind my family pretended they had. Karen greeted me with a look that sharpened when she saw my uniform, then softened when she saw my face. "He's expecting you," she said, and pointed me down a narrow hallway. Elliot Hargrove stood in a doorway, gray-haired sweater vest, glasses perched low on his nose. He extended a hand like we were meeting under ordinary circumstances. "Staff Sergeant Rourke," he said. "I'm sorry it's under these conditions." I shook his hand. "Thank you for seeing me today." He led me into his office. Diplomas lined the walls, but the room didn't feel like a trophy case. It felt lived-in working. A manila folder sat open on his desk like he'd already cleared space for whatever I was about to drop into his life. I didn't waste time. I pulled my phone out, and opened the folder of photos and videos I'd taken. I told him everything in a straight timeline, the way you brief a situation when you don't have the luxury of emotion. I came home. The house was freezing. The note said they went on a cruise and I should take care of Grandpa. I found him in the dark, hypothermic. Called 911. Hospital treated him. Social worker involved. APS involved. Grandpa told me the landline was cut months ago. He told me heat being turned off wasn't new. He told me there were documents my parents didn't know about. I found them in the den. Here are photos. Here's the letter from Imogene. Here's the deed copy. Here are bank statements showing regular transfers to my father's account. Here's the will copy. Elliot listened without interrupting, his expression tightening as the picture assembled. When I slid the photos of the deed and statements across, he adjusted his glasses and read slowly, carefully, like every word mattered because it did. "Your grandmother was extremely thorough," he said at last. I can tell I replied, voice flat, because the alternative was letting my anger show in a room where strategy mattered more than release. He tapped the deed. "This aligns with the documents on file here," he said, "which means your parents do not own that house. Your grandfather does. And these provisions here were designed specifically to prevent coercion." He turned to the bank statements. "These transfers," he said, and his tone shifted from legal calm to something sharper, "are not inherently illegal if authorized, but the pattern is concerning, especially paired with neglect." "He barely uses a smartphone," I said. "He thought they were handling things." Elliot nodded, the kind of nod that says he's seen this before. If they were acting as informal caregivers and siphoning funds without transparency, it can cross into exploitation. And with the medical situation you've described, it creates a very serious picture. I sat straighter. "What do we do?" Elliot folded his hands. "Two tracks," he said. "Legal and safety. On the legal side, we can move quickly to protect your grandfather's assets. We can contact his bank, request that access be limited or that additional verification be required for transfers. We can also prepare a demand for accounting. If your parents want to claim those transfers were reimbursements, they will need to substantiate them." "And safety?" I asked. "Safety is immediate," he said. "He cannot return to a situation where the same people who left him cold have full control over his heat, his food, his phone, and his money. You already have APS involved. That's good. We need coordination. A plan for where he stays, who has authority, and how any future contact is handled." My phone buzzed again, this time with Ms. Tessa's name. The timing felt like the universe reinforcing a point. I answered, put her on speaker with Elliot's permission, and gave her an update. "I found the documents," I said. "Letter from my grandmother, deed showing Grandpa owns the house, will copy with protections, bank statements showing regular transfers to my dad's account. I'm with the attorney now." Miss Tessa's voice came through clear and professional. "Good work," she said. "We should set a formal mediation as soon as possible, within the next day or two. But before that, we need to ensure your grandfather's discharge plan doesn't put him back under the same roof without safeguards." Elliot leaned toward the phone. "This is Elliot Hargrove," he said. "I represent Mr. Rourke." "I agree. We should coordinate a plan that prioritizes safety and limits financial access immediately." Ms. Tessa didn't hesitate. I can arrange a mediation session in the next 24 to 48 hours, she said, and I can request a welfare plan and oversight. We may also involve a home care nurse as a neutral professional witness if there's an in-person meeting. My mind latched onto that. A nurse, I repeated. Someone who can document in real time. Yes, Ms. Tessa said. That protects him and it reduces the chance of things escalating privately. I ended the call with a tight thank you and stood up from Elliot's desk, feeling the pieces click into place. The situation was shifting from survival to structure, from rage to process. That was the only way this could end without my parents wriggling out through excuses and tears. Before leaving the office, Elliot looked at me over his glasses. Do not let your parents get their hands on the originals, he said. Keep them secured. And avoid direct confrontation without witnesses. People do desperate things when they feel control slipping. I already got a message from my dad, I said, and showed him the text. Elliot's mouth tightened. That tells you everything you need to know, he said. I drove back toward the hospital with the heater blasting and my thoughts moving faster than the car. In the parking lot, I sat for a second, grounding myself. Then I went inside and headed straight to Grandpa's room. He was awake, propped slightly, looking tired but alert. When he saw me, his gaze went straight to my face like he was reading for signs of failure. I found it, I said quietly, leaning in. The letter from Grandma. The deed. The statements. I spoke to the attorney she named. He confirmed it. Grandpa didn't look surprised. He looked relieved, but the relief was controlled, like he'd been holding it back until he knew he could afford it. His eyes stayed on mine, searching. You kept your head, he asked. Yes, I said. I did it clean. A faint nod. Approval without praise. I don't want you going back there alone again, he murmured. I'm not, I promised. APS is arranging mediation. And we're setting up a plan so you're not under their control when they come back. He stared at the blanket for a moment, then whispered, Good. I stepped out into the hallway and called the home care coordinator the nurse station referred me to. When I asked about arranging a nurse to assist with discharge and be present for any initial home transition, the woman on the line didn't sound surprised either. She sounded like someone who'd heard enough stories to know what this one might become. Her name is June Serrano, she said. She's with the home care program. Experienced, calm. She can help document and support. Set it up, I said. Please. By late afternoon, I got a message from Ms. Tessa confirming what my gut had already been warning me about. The cruise ship had changed its schedule. My parents could be back sooner than expected. The countdown wasn't theoretical anymore. I drove back to the house before dusk, parked, and sat for a moment watching the front door like it might open on its own. The neighborhood was quiet again, holiday quiet, but my body didn't feel any peace in it. I went inside and moved through the rooms with a purpose that felt almost clinical. I left the note on the counter exactly where it was. I didn't add a single decoration. I didn't soften the scene. I wanted the house to reflect what they'd done, not what they wanted to pretend it was. I set a chair at the dining table where I could see the entryway. I placed a clean manila envelope there with copies of the key documents and my timeline notes. The originals stayed locked away where my parents couldn't reach them. My phone sat beside the envelope. My hands stayed still. My breathing stayed steady. In my head, there was one thought repeating like a mission statement. When they walk through that door, they'll think this is still their house, their story, their control. But I've turned it into a place where the truth is waiting. I was back in the house before dusk, exactly as planned. Eerie settled into night early that time of year, the sky dimming into a dull slate that pressed down on the neighborhood. The streetlights flickered on one by one, casting pale circles on the snowbanks. Inside the house, nothing had changed from the way I left it. No decorations, no music, no softening of the truth. The note still lay on the kitchen counter exactly where my mother had placed it, the ink unbothered by time or conscience. I turned the heat up after I finished documenting everything, not because they deserved warmth, but because Grandpa never again would be left to shiver in that space. The furnace rumbled to life, a low mechanical growl that felt almost accusatory. I let it run, then took my seat at the dining table. In front of me sat a thin stack of paper, my handwritten timeline, the manila envelope with copies of the documents, my phone placed screen down but recording. I wasn't waiting to argue. I was waiting to confirm facts. The sound came first, tires on slush, a car door. Then the scrape of luggage wheels against concrete. Voices floated in through the front door before it even opened, loud and careless. "I'm telling you that buffet. Too much dessert, I swear." The door swung open, and with it came a rush of warmth from somewhere else. Salt air, sunscreen, indulgence. My mother stepped in first. Bright floral shirt under her coat, smiling like she'd walked into a postcard. My father followed, tanned, relaxed, irritation already forming when he saw me sitting there. "Oh," he said. "You're here?" "I've been here," I replied. My mother's smile faltered. "Caius, honey, we didn't think Grandpa's in the hospital," I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Hypothermia. Dehydration. He almost died. My father let out a breath through his nose. That's dramatic. I didn't respond right away. I let the silence sit just long enough for his words to hang there on their own. Then I slid the timeline across the table toward them. "This is the order of events," I said. Time I arrived. Temperature in the house. Condition he was in. Time I called 911. Time he was admitted. It's documented. My mother pressed her lips together. "Caius, we were just trying to get a break. We didn't want to bother you. You're always so intense." He was alone in the dark, I said. With no heat, no water, no phone. My father waved a hand. "The furnace is old. You know that. And he never uses his phone anyway. These social workers love to exaggerate." "APS has a file," I said. "They've already classified it as neglect pending review." That landed differently. I saw it in the way his shoulders tightened. In the way my mother's eyes flicked to the note on the counter, then away. "This doesn't need to go outside the family," my father said. "We can talk about this here." I reached forward and placed the manila envelope on the table between us. "We are." He opened it. The first page he saw was the deed. His face changed immediately, the color draining just enough to be noticeable. He flipped to the next page too fast, then the next, as if speed could undo what his eyes were reading. "Where did you get this?" he snapped. "My grandmother left instructions," I said. "She left a letter. And a lawyer." "You had no right to go through our things," he said, reaching for the envelope. I pulled it back calmly and placed it flat again. "Those are copies. The originals aren't in this house." My mother stared at the deed like it might dissolve if she looked hard enough. "This can't be current." "It is," I said. The attorney confirmed it. My father laughed once, sharp and hollow. "So what you're trying to take the house now, I'm trying to keep Grandpa alive," I said. "And safe." I stood and walked to the counter, lifted the note and set it down in front of them. "I didn't write this," I said. "I didn't rearrange it. I didn't add context. This is exactly what I found." My mother stared at her own handwriting. For the first time since they'd walked in, she said nothing. The front door opened again. I didn't turn right away. I didn't need to. I heard the careful steps, the measured breathing, the presence that changed the room without a word. Grandpa walked in, wrapped in blankets, supported by a woman in navy scrubs. June Serrano, home care nurse, neutral, professional, a witness who didn't belong to our family and couldn't be dismissed as emotional. My father's mouth fell open. "Dad, what are you doing here coming home?" Grandpa said quietly. "Before you finished what you started." I moved to his side, steadying him by the elbow, and guided him to his chair. June stayed close, her eyes taking in everything without judgment, her clipboard tucked under one arm like a silent reminder that this wasn't a private performance anymore. "Bring the papers," Grandpa said. I handed him the envelope. He opened it slowly, deliberately, and laid the pages across his lap. He didn't rush. He didn't dramatize. "This house," he said, tapping the deed, "is still mine." My father swallowed. "Dad, we talked about transferring." "You talked," Grandpa said. I listened. "That's not the same thing." He lifted the bank statements next. I asked you to help manage. I didn't ask you to take. My mother's voice shook. We were overwhelmed. You went on a cruise, Grandpa said. Silence fell. Thick, unavoidable. I won't live under your control anymore, Grandpa continued. My money will be handled through my lawyer. My care will be documented, and I won't be alone in the cold again. My father looked at me, then really looked, and I saw fear there. Not of me. Of consequences. We can fix this, he said. We don't need outsiders. June cleared her throat softly. Sir, she said, calm and steady, my role is to ensure Mr. Rourke's safety. Everything said here is relevant. That ended it. I gave the date and time of the mediation. I stated the conditions plainly. No arguments, no raised voices, just facts. When I helped Grandpa back toward the hallway, my father muttered something under his breath about money and signatures. Not denial, admission. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The record already had. The mediation room was small, neutral, intentionally unremarkable. Beige walls, a fake fern in the corner, a table big enough for paperwork but not for theatrics. Grandpa insisted on sitting upright, hands folded, eyes clear. He wasn't cargo. He was present. Miss Tessa opened the meeting with ground rules. This wasn't a criminal court, but it wasn't a family chat either. Everything discussed could carry consequences. My parents nodded stiffly, already boxed in by process. We started with the living conditions, photos, timeline, medical records, the nurse's notes. Each piece fit too cleanly to be argued away. My father tried once half-hearted to blame the furnace. It didn't hold. The thermostat photos spoke louder than he could. Then came finances. Elliot laid out the structure: deed, will, safeguards, transfers. The bank manager confirmed access didn't mean ownership. Silence followed. My parents shifted from denial to damage control. Stress. Debt. Fear. Ms. Tessa acknowledged feelings without excusing actions. The agreement took shape in ink. Restricted access to accounts, repayment schedule, oversight, mandatory check-ins, Grandpa's right to choose where and how he lived. I'm not trying to ruin you, Grandpa said at the end. I'm trying to live. That was all. Months later, the house was warm, not perfect, honest. Grandpa was safe. My parents were humbled, learning slowly what accountability actually meant. That Christmas, the cold wasn't the weather. It was neglect. And what finally warmed everything wasn't forgiveness or decorations or music. It was the moment silence broke and the truth stayed on the table.